Welcome to the AskALLi Member Q&A podcast, where we answer the most burning self-publishing questions. We're here with another episode, and I'm your host, Michael Ronn, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Blank from We Grow Media. How are you, Dan?
I am wonderful. Always good to be here.
And it is June, and we're back with another episode. And you know what? We haven't done in the time that we've been together, any of these months? We have not actually talked about what we're actually working on. So what are you currently working on, Dan?
For me, it's two things. I'm working on my next book. So I came out with a book a little over a year ago, and now I'm writing actually the prequel to it. Working on this book for years. I'm excited to finally get into shape. It's at the point now where I've got to really draw a line in the sand and put a deadline. And then the other thing is my Creative Shift Mastermind group. It's really where I work with like a small group of people. So I'm setting up the summer session of being with writers and artists, and that is what I love to do.
Does your book have a title?
Right now it's called From Dabbler to Doer.
Oh, okay. Just like your podcast.
Well, the podcast is Dabblers versus Doers. I've tried to make it less aggressive, but we'll see where it goes.
Very cool. Well, definitely keep us updated on that.
Thank you.
So I am working on bringing my YouTube channel back. So some people listening to this may know that I had a YouTube channel called Author Level Up. I'm bringing that back in July. So I've been recording a lot of videos, writing advice videos and things like that from my office. And so I've edited like my 5th or 15th. I don't remember how many. I've shot so many different videos. It's kind of crazy. So I'll be launching with like 20 videos. So I'm really excited to bring that back. So I'll definitely share more about that when I come back. Probably next month when it launches. So, all right, so let's jump into the first question. And we're going to do some things a little different this month. You know, normally we start with the rapid fire questions and we end with the theme of the month, so to speak. But we thought this month we had such a great question that was submitted by one of our members that we would start with that question, have some conversations about that, and then end it with the rapid fire. So let us know, guys, what you think about this new format. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. So we're always open to feedback, and we want to make this show engaging and compelling for you guys while we're answering your questions. So why don't we jump into the first question, which is this month's theme, and that is, what are some good low-cost, low-time marketing strategies for authors? Dan, do you want to read the original question that inspired this?
I do, and this is from Liam. I love this question because I love the words that he used. Why can't I find a free, fruitful marketing strategy not costing an author a ridiculous amount of money and hours of time on social media, ideally spent on my own writing? Love this question.
Yes, and it's such a good question too, because there's so much behind it. I think that almost anyone listening to this podcast, I think, would relate to, right? So why can't I find any fruitful? And I think that's the key word for his question, right? So why can't I find any fruitful marketing strategies? So marketing strategies are actually going to not cost me money, not suck up my time, and actually make me money, actually be ROI positive, which, you know, it's funny because I think that there are so many. If there's one thing that this industry doesn't have a problem with, it's that there are no shortage of marketing opportunities. I mean, it seems like every week there's something new that pops up, you know, some new distributor, some new service, some new publicity company, some new publicity service that comes up that tries to find a way to make authors some money. And they don't always work out, right?
Well, it's tough because there's often a life cycle for these things. There's something that someone discovers and works, and then right as everyone's piling in to copy it, it starts working less. Sometimes because people are piling in to copy it, sometimes because someone plugs a hole, and sometimes just because the trend shifts. When the first Facebook ad appeared and you said, whoa, look at this great opportunity, I'm going to click. That was great. And then now there's a billion Facebook ads, so it's less effective because people are so tired of them.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about being a first mover. You know, whenever some of these things jump on, but I think there's a danger there too, because you can easily jump onto all these different bandwagons and not so much be effective or intentional. So what we decided to do is we put together a list of some very cheap and low cost strategies that some very successful indie authors have used to build their platforms. And I thought maybe we'd go over some of these, Dan, and maybe this will inspire you, Liam, to do some things differently. It's my opinion that I think that there are fruitful, low cost, low time suck marketing strategies, but I do think that if everything you're looking at looks expensive, you're probably looking at the wrong things. And another thing I would say, and I think a lot of successful authors would agree with me, is that when you're just starting off, you've got problems, right? Everyone has problems. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you've got, okay, how am I going to format my book? How am I going to finish my book? How am I going to edit my book? So as you start to become more successful and build a platform around you, those problems don't go away. They just become magnified, but you're more equipped to handle them a little bit better. So the issue of marketing and it never goes away. And there are honestly a lot of really expensive marketing services out there that are probably not going to make you any money. So you have to think about it like that. And so I thought it would be a good idea to go over a few low cost, cheap marketing strategies that might be able to help you out.
One thing I just want to add, though, when I read between the lines of the question, what I also read into it is low risk.
Yes.
And I think that's the challenging one because, you can start on the list, but I'll say that the things I tend to err towards are things that require social risk, require you to put yourself out there. And I think that makes people uncomfortable. They'd rather click a Facebook button or an Amazon button, no social risk whatsoever, and know that it's going to work. And that's a tough thing to find, but start with the list.
No, I love that. And I think a lot of the things on this list are low financial risk, but medium social risk.
Yes.
All right. So that's a great distinction. So the first thing that I put on here was networking with other authors. Right. So networking with other authors in your genre, there's a bit of a social risk there. Right. So if you don't know the heavy hitters or they're not going to respond to your emails, that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But I think if you look at the stories of a lot of successful people currently, it's because they got other authors in their genre to share their book. And if you start building those relationships with other authors in your genre so that they can plug your book during the first 30 or 60 days, via their mailing list or via their social media, one author is probably not going to make much of a difference. But if you can do that with several authors, that has changed the game for a lot of people. And so that doesn't cost you anything at all.
I would add to that there's the idea of doing it with what you called heavy hitters or influencers, as people say. I think there's an entirely different strategy there of ignoring those people, or in addition to that, just developing relationships with other authors. A friend of mine had taught a course at a school in New York, a writing course, and they said, they'd bring in these famous guest speakers. Everyone was vying to meet that guest speaker, and my friend, the teacher, was saying, look, you can meet them, but look around you. Right now, these all seem like nobody's sitting next to you. In 5 or 10 years, you are going to desperately need these colleagues. Build these relationships now. They are going to, skyrocket you to success when 5 years from now, you're both in this other place and you have 5 years of history and 5 years of caring, and suddenly they're an editor somewhere, they're a bestseller. You're going to want that relationship. So I'd also say look around at people who are at your level or below your level or slightly above your level, and don't discount the power of that relationship.
That's great. And everyone starts at zero, right? So everyone starts with nothing, and sometimes it's a good idea to build those relationships with people who are along for the ride with you, because that's how you can start using a stepping stone, right? Maybe one of those people does know an influencer down the road, and there's all kinds of things that can happen, and you never know where relationships lead. So I
also think it makes relationships less transactional. One of the things I don't like about social media is this idea that we can look at someone and we can see a number and we can say, she's important, he's not, therefore I'm going to gravitate towards them. I like this idea of just learning how to care, learning how to start a conversation, realizing that you can talk to an author who has no books, no followers, and still get a wonderful insight and a wonderful fan that will benefit you in a million ways, even though on the surface they've got no followers and they have no success.
Yeah, and it's funny because that actually leads me into the next one, which is posting content on social media that's relevant and engaging, right? So there might be that person, right, who may not have any followers or anything like that, but they still can share your content and they still can engage with you. And if you're creating content that's engaging, if you're creating content that is interesting, so like if you're a fiction author, you may want to close your ears a little bit because not everyone's going to want to read about your books on social media. I know it's kind of hard to hear, and I think it's a lesson that I've kind of learned the hard way. But I think if you can find a different angle, like that leads some sort of an insight into your books without plugging your books, like if you write mystery novels or cozy mysteries about someone who loves tea, then maybe you're writing about tea or things like that, I think is interesting. I think that's important too, because social media now, and I think it always has been this way, but I think it's really moving in this direction now that everyone has kind of jumped on the bandwagon at Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, is that they prioritize content that's engaging. So like on Facebook, they tell you right then and there, if you have a Facebook page, how many people your content reached. So Facebook determines the moment you hit post, how relevant your content is going to be. And so I think that forces us to be honest. And I think it forces us to really focus on creating things that not only matter, but that are going to be engaging to people and are relevant.
What I like about that is it's old-fashioned. This is not about digital media or new media, because if you, me, and 40 people are in a room, the man who walks in saying, "Hey, everyone, my book just came out," and that's the person you're going to avoid. The person you're drawn to is the person who tells you like why they love writing and why this story captured them, or other books that are similar, and they draw you in. And I think that's what happens on social media too, is that you're engaging with a real person on a human level. You're not just marketing, and it's a very old-fashioned thing.
Well, and that brings up the idea that there's a difference between marketing and promotion, right? So marketing is letting people know, or letting people in your target audience know, that your book is out there. So it's creating a lot of those channels or those underground tunnels for people to find your work in the future. Promotion is you actually taking a megaphone and saying, hey guys, this is my book. It's out there. Go grab it, that sort of thing. And I think people mix up the promotion with the marketing. And I think a lot of authors focus on promotion without having done the work, the marketing work that's required in order to help your book sustain some sales.
And I saw an interesting example of this. I follow Susan Orlean, the author, on Instagram or in Facebook and everywhere, really. And there's one post where she said, "I'm going to Book Expo this week." Something like, just a woman with a book in her hand and her heart on her sleeve. Her new book comes out in the fall. And then, the next post is her in the big hall at Javits Center, and above her is the biggest banner you've ever seen. This thing is like 50 feet by 60 feet of her next book, which I think is called The Library Book. And it's just sort of that idea of like her publisher buying a 50 by 50 banner of her book is promotion. Her sharing how she feels in this moment on social media is more marketing. And it's funny how you can have both and how distinct they are.
Yeah. And in general, it seems like for me, marketing is cheaper than promotion. It seems like when you're promoting, that's when you got to pony up the cash, and like I said, it sometimes it's low risk, sometimes it's high risk, but I think knowing the difference between those two, I think is really important, and it's foundational. So the next thing we want to talk about was email, newsletters, and autoresponders, right? So this is for the people that are already in your audience, and you may not have a whole lot of people that are in your audience, but this is an effective way to market yourself, right? Market and promote. So having autoresponders that tell people who you are, what you're about, what your story is, so that when they sign up for your newsletter, day one, they get your freebie. Day two, maybe they get another autoresponder with your story, whatever your sequence is, or however long you want to make it. I think that's like a built-in marketing machine, right? Because it's telling people the story of you and telling them how they can connect with you, and you're emotionally connecting with them. And then on the flip side, when you do have a book to launch, or product to launch, or a video to launch, you can use your newsletter as a campaign to send that to them so that they can go and do it. And it doesn't, to your point, Dan, feel so transactional at that point.
Yeah, and I think it underlies, again, another point about old-fashionedness and basics of communication, that you can think about, is Michael saying I should be on MailChimp and do this sequence? It's like, no. He's saying, yeah, maybe I'll use that tool, but you've got to think, if someone just finds you and they say, I'm going to join your list, what do they know about you? maybe you should introduce yourself. Maybe you should send a video. Maybe you should send them something that tells them about what you're going to be doing. And you've got to think about that on a communication level, not just a which MailChimp button do I push, which one is going to work. It really is having empathy with your audience.
Oh, and there's another piece to that as well, right? So when people buy, so there's a process that readers go through, and for the most part, it's going to be similar for most readers. When they buy a book, if they've never heard of you before, they're most interested in the book. So they're buying the book based on the book description, they're buying it based on the cover, they're buying it based on the sample, and they read the book and they're reading it and they're thinking about your characters or they're thinking about your content if you're writing nonfiction. They don't care about you when they're reading the book. But when they finish the book and if they like the book, that's when they care about you. And that's when you get that door opens just a little bit. That's when you want to, I don't want to say kick it open, but, keep it open and share information about you so that you can start connecting with them as a person, right? Because that's a very limited window when they actually care and when they want to know more about you.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're leading into with that as well as the idea of at the end of the book, let people know, join my newsletter list. This is what I'm about. On Instagram, I share about characters. I also share all my tea recipes, whatever that is, where thinking about that moment when people are interested, the exact moment, and saying, where are they and how can I communicate to them in that moment?
Absolutely. So some rapid fire things that you can do cheap and quick. So having a street team and organizing people around your book launches so that they can post reviews for you, that is completely free. All you have to do is have a mailing list provider to do that. Posting videos about yourself, like Dan mentioned, completely free, and you can do that on your smartphone. You don't have to have a fancy DSLR camera or anything like that. Just pick up the phone, point it at yourself, and hit record, and just talk about what's on your mind. That is a tried and true, super easy way. Posting it on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want to post it, that's super free and super easy. Writing a short story or making one of your books free and posting that everywhere so that as many people as possible can find it. It's probably not going to pour gasoline on your book like it used to back in 2011, 2012, the perma-free option. But if you've got something that's valuable and you don't want to give everything away, right? But you got something that's valuable that you can give away, and you can point people to it, you can see a steady stream of people coming into your platform over time. So I've got a couple other things here. Putting information about all your books on your website, in your email signature, and on your social media pages. It's amazing how many people don't always do this. Mm-hmm. So you always want to make sure that you just assume that wherever you've got a guidepost out there in the wild, that someone is coming across it for the first time and they have no idea who you are. So when you're looking at your email signature, maybe put a link to your books in your email signature. Don't be over the top about it, but your Facebook page, assume someone coming to your Facebook page has never seen you before. So what is the quintessential book that you would want them to read, right? Mm-hmm. Being on Goodreads, free. Publishing your book wide on as many retailers as possible, that's free. KDP Select, it's free. Book promo ads, they're super cheap, but you can get yourself into trouble. So make sure you do your research on which ones are actually effective. Affiliate links. So, mentioning products and services that you use and recommend, that's free. And that's a way to start building some income to help you. Author AMS ads for Amazon. Those are going to be super cheap. Again, Amazon doesn't, at this time of recording, doesn't spend your money as rapidly as Facebook does. So, that's something that I personally have found to be fruitful. And if you haven't checked out Brian Meeks's course on AMS ads, that's something definitely that I would recommend and check out. And then also, this applies mostly to nonfiction authors, but putting together a media kit or a press kit that promotes you to podcast interviewers or to people that want to feature you on their blogs or whatever that might be, that's also free, right? So including photos of yourself, talking points, podcast interviews tend to lead to sales. And so if you're a nonfiction author, the more of those you can do, the more people you can bring into your gravitational field. But yeah, and that's those are some of kind of the low cost, low time intensive things that I put together from a list perspective that I think have, if you talk to a lot of successful authors in the indie space, I think that these are some things that they have done and they can credit to some of their success.
I would characterize it from my end as just two things, because I go back to his question, this idea of how do you do this without eating up all your time that should be spent writing? If I think about what an author should be doing, the first is they should be writing. And quite frankly, all I do is talk to writers and artists and the interviews and just my work. And I find that one thing that separates successful authors from unsuccessful is the successful authors write a lot. I just interviewed you. I recommend people check out that podcast because you write a lot. And I think a lot of people who say they write don't. They have a book that they're really promoting and then they're working on something new. But if you added up the hours in a week, it would not be many. It might not even be an hour. So the idea of saying, I don't want to be on social media, I want to be writing. I want people to live up to that. Figure out, are you writing an hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day? What are you writing? How can you write more? And the other thing, I love the list you shared, but I'd also say it comes down to just talk to readers. Someone I know owns a bookstore in Brooklyn, and David Sedaris just did a book signing there. And per what he's famous for, he signed books for 4 hours after his reading because he talks to people, he knows them. And in doing so, it's not getting yourself all bent into not figuring out Facebook ads and author ads and this ad. He understands his readers better than anyone. And that helps him figure out any kind of marketing he needs to do. What should be in a newsletter? Should it be Facebook? What should I share? He gets stories. He understands them better than anyone. And that's the two things I encourage authors to do is write more, create more, and understand your reader better than anyone. And these are both foundational, regardless of whether it's 2002, 2018, or 2036.
Yes. All right. And I think that ends the theme on a great note. So let's jump into our rapid fire questions.
All right. The first is from Isabel. What is the best way to build a team of publishing professionals around me?
All right. So Isabel's question, the background behind it is that she's planning to publish 3 online books in the immediate future. She's going to set up her own multilingual publishing company, and she wants some assistance with the whole production process and is looking for a production assistant. So it sounds like Isabel is on a pretty advanced path here, right?
Yeah.
So being able to start your own company and you're looking for help, that's really awesome. So what I would recommend is you treat this like any other. You treat it like an actual job posting, right? So if this is someone you're going to be bringing in full time, if you're going to be bringing in a full-time team around you, you may want to post it on Upwork or post it on, places where you're looking for virtual assistants and actually interview them, right? Actually go through the process of actually interviewing someone and seeing what kind of skills they have, what skills they bring to the table, and treating it like that. And a great book about all of this that I think I would recommend to you, Isabel, if you haven't read it, is Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. It's basically the guide to hiring virtual assistants in any industry, but how to hire them, what to look for, some things that you want to know working with them. But I think a lot of people listening to this are probably not there yet, probably not at the point where you would want to hire or even be able financially to hire an assistant. But just know that there are places like Upwork and places where you can find freelancers that can do some part-time work for you to help take some things off of your plate. And that's actually more affordable than you think.
Yeah, just one thing I'd add is sometimes you want to do an experiment ahead of time of, do an experiment for 8 weeks with someone to see if that is who you need to hire or the type of role you need to hire. Because what you think you're going to get when you hire even the most qualified person, and the reality is different. You're not hiring a clone of yourself. Someone who gets it is going to put that in. And another resource a friend told me about recently was bookjobs.com. I've not used them myself, but the friend had a very positive experience with them.
Interesting.
All right, next question is from Marguerite, and they ask, what is the easiest way to build an author website?
I love this question, and this honestly could have been a theme for our show. So there are some great tools. I think it's never been easier to build an author website. And it's amazing how many people I talk to who think that they have to know HTML and they've got to hand code their website and all this stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. That's like so like 1999. If that's your degree and you're in computer science, I mean, more power to you. But I think the average person, WordPress is probably going to be the best, most industry standard option, just because of the flexibility, the apps, the third-party plugins. It's just super easy to set up a self-hosted WordPress, and you can do that via Bluehost or HostGator, or there's all kinds of different, GoDaddy. There's all kinds of different hosting companies out there. If you're not a WordPress person, and not everyone is, WordPress does have its cons. There's Squarespace, which I've heard a lot of great things about. I've got some friends that use Squarespace, and they've got some pretty good looking websites. They don't maybe offer as much flexibility as WordPress, but I think the pricing, it's pretty affordable, and they do offer some good perks. And if Squarespace is not your thing, you could check out Wix as well. Wix, they've been doing a lot of advertising, at least here in the States. Goodness gracious, I can't watch Hulu without seeing a Wix ad these days. So you could check out Wix. I've heard really good things about them. I don't know that they have as much flexibility as Squarespace or WordPress. I could be stand corrected on that, but those are some good low cost, really easy ways. One way that I would not recommend, and we say this every episode, but we at ALLi recommend that authors be the creative directors of their careers, right? And so being an independent author means being independent in every sense of the word. And we would not recommend that you use a site like WordPress.com or Blogger, because your content is basically stored on someone else's servers. You want to be able to own your content. You want to be able to own your platform in case anything were to ever happen to one of those platforms. You want to be able to continue to find a way to stay in touch with your readers.
All right. The next question is from Shana, or Shana. Is it possible to distribute a 4x6 book on CreateSpace?
Interesting question. So I looked into this, and on CreateSpace, the answer is no. But on Ingram Spark, they will allow you to distribute a 4x7 novel. So it's not, or a book. So it's not quite what you were looking for, but that's close enough. And of course, we always recommend Ingram Spark. They're one of our partner members, so they do allow you to do that.
All right. Next question is from Nick. How do I go about getting permission to use a song lyric from a famous artist?
Okay, so two parts to this question. So Nick emailed us with, basically, he wanted to use an Eminem song lyric, and I believe he had actually gone through the channels to secure permission from whoever owns the rights to Eminem song lyrics. And basically they gave him permission, and so he just wanted to know if he was okay to proceed. And legally, I don't know the whole process of going through that, Nick. But I think you've done a lot more than most authors would do, so hats off to you for that. Before you asked this question, it kind of blew my mind. I didn't even think it was possible to go through to record labels and get the actual permission. I just thought that they would automatically say no, right? But I actually looked into this, and there is a process for doing it. So if you want to secure a song lyric for like an epigraph at the beginning of your novel, like if you want to use, a song lyric, there actually is a process for doing this. And so you basically just have to go find out who the record label is. If it's a mainstream musician like Eminem, or, insert name here for famous singers, depending on when you're listening to this, ASCAP, ASCAP, they handle a lot of the licensing and royalties for a lot of the major record labels. And so I went to their website, and they actually make it really easy to request permission on any songs that might be in their database. So, and apparently they're pretty responsive. So that would be the first place that I would go. And looking at some of the pricing and things like that, I don't know how much it would be depending on who you're looking for, lyric wise, but that's how you would go about getting that permission. And that's where I would start. If it's an indie label, I would start with the label themselves, and they're probably a little bit more accessible. You can probably find the information on their website. And if it's an actual artist, then you could go to the artist themselves if they're self-published or if they're actually indie artists. But I think the trap you want to avoid falling into is just because you get permission from the artist doesn't necessarily mean that you have permission. Now, we're not lawyers. It's not legal advice, but I have seen situations where people say that they've got permission from the artist, but the artist doesn't actually own the rights to the song. It's actually the record label. So just make sure that whoever you go through actually has the clearance to give you those rights. But great question, and something that I think a lot of people would like to do with their novels, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much more controlled it is. You can't just put a song lyric out there because you've sang that Led Zeppelin song your whole life. It is very controlled. It's very different from just kind of quoting someone who said something.
Yes, never use anything that you did not create without the owner's permission. Yes, so Ian wrote a memoir of an African country, and it's based on his dissertation. So basically, in the academic world, there's bibliographies that you have to have at the end of your books, and they have to follow a certain format, and it's complicated sometimes when you get into these. So the issue I think he was having is that he formatted his bibliography page, but it just looks terrible when you go into print. Right, because when you put a link on a printed page, it just looks terrible because you can't touch it, and you can't go to a website off of a printed book. So my recommendation is, and I have some bibliography pages in some of my nonfiction. What I've done is I've kind of just bucked the trends a little bit, and I embed the links in the actual text. So I've got the citation there, and then you embed the link in the text, so that way in the paperback version the link doesn't actually appear. And then you could do something like at the top or bottom of your bibliography page, put additional links are available at, and then link to some page on your website. So that way on the ebook version, they can simply tap and go to wherever the links that you've put in there. They'll show up in the ebook version, but they won't show up in the paperback, and you don't have to worry about formatting different versions for each format.
All right. Next question is from Karen. If you publish books wide, what is the best way to build a readership on smaller platforms that don't offer advertising services?
Yes. So Karen asked this in our Facebook group, and Amazon has AMS ads, Kobo has Kobo ads or Kobo promotions, and Facebook allows you to do custom audiences. But outside of that, how do you build an audience on some of these smaller platforms? And the answer is tough. Right. It's really tough. I don't know that there is an answer right now. I think a lot of these platforms are so much smaller, and they don't necessarily have the resources to give you to build a dedicated audience there. But just brainstorming, I think, if your genre is popular on Instagram, you could consider some influencer marketing on that, or you could consider smaller Instagram people that are in your niche. YouTube book bloggers have a pretty big community that I don't know that everyone knows about, and having one of them review your books could be helpful. That could be a potential way to start building up an audience on another retailer, but they get a lot of submissions, so it's kind of hard to get in with some of those booktubers. So my advice, Karen, which I think you were expecting, we kind of had some conversations offline about this, is that I can't think of a better answer at this point. But I just think you have to start with your audience and try to understand them a little bit more and see if maybe they can recommend some ideas to help you find some other readers. But I'd love to hear your guys' notes in the comments and see if there's anything else that we're missing.
And one thing to keep in mind, too, is sometimes you can't be everywhere promoting on every platform, especially if it's a smaller platform or a smaller retailer platform. You've got to realize that people hop around. Someone who shops on Amazon could very well go to bnn.com, could very well go to some indie author, indie bookseller, retailer website as well. And you don't want to drive yourself nuts trying to be everywhere, advertising everywhere, because it won't all be effective, and you're segmenting your audience a little too much. All right, final question is from Julie. Does ALLi recommend PublishDrive?
And the answer is yes. PublishDrive is one of our partner members. They are an aggregator that will publish your book at a lot of different places. So I think they go to Apple, they go to Amazon, but I think the really cool thing about PublishDrive is that they have access to a lot of international markets that Drafted Digital and Smashwords can't get to. So they've got a very cool international focus that I like. They're kind of the new kid on the block as we speak, but I've actually published a few of my books with them, and I've been pleased on how easy it is to upload the books to that platform is. And they seem to treat their authors really well. So the answer would be yes. I would definitely check out PublishDrive, at least in addition to Smashwords and Drafted Digital, and they can get you into some places that the others can't.
That's it. That's all we got today.
All right. So Thank you guys for listening. This wraps up another episode of the AskALLi Member Q&A podcast. And remember that if you have your question, we would love to answer it online. If you're an ALLi member, be sure to go into your dashboard and follow a link to the form where you can fill out your question, and you just might hear it on the air answered by myself and Dan. And if you love this episode and if you like listening to us every month, be sure to subscribe. We would love to be in your earbuds or wherever you are every month when you're listening to this show. And don't forget that we've got a lot of other great episodes and content from our other ALLi members on this show or on this channel as well. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you next month.